Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm Sam Albanese from the National Weather Service. To start with, we do have a winter weather advisory in the Yakutat area. Expecting the snowfall to continue into tomorrow morning. Several inches more can be expected there. Also in the interior portion of the state, the north side of the Alaska Range, right on up into the Koyukuk Valley, as well as the middle Yukon Valley. Wind chills, pretty dangerously low wind chills, 45 below or so, especially along the mountains and in channel terrain areas. So pretty significant conditions to be concerned about. Taking a look at our satellite imagery over the North Pacific, and we'll start with this loop over the Bering Sea. And again, this continuation of this north-northeasterly flow down across the Bering Sea, you can see it in the way the clouds are flowing. And right along here, you can see the ice edge. The ice edge is basically moving to the south and west at about a pretty good clip, about one mile per hour or so. Expecting the ice edge to potentially get down to the Pribilof Islands in the next several days, because we really don't see much of a change in this pattern, and that could have some impact out there in the Bering Sea. Running the loop one more time again, you can see how this flow pattern is continuing with that northeasterly flow. That's some pretty cold air that's coming out off the mainland, and that's resulting in that ice continuing to grow. Take a look at our satellite imagery over the state of Alaska itself. Generally pretty clear conditions and cold conditions throughout much of Alaska. What's noticeable here is over the last day or so, the clouds filled in the Gulf of Alaska and along the North Gulf Coast. Kodiak Island stayed in the clouds. They continued to snow throughout the day today with not heavy snow, but they were getting some snow, a couple inches, with windy conditions and reduced visibilities and blowing snow there. And again, we'll run that loop one more time, and you can see how the clouds basically filled in along the coast and across the Kenai Peninsula. That generally will result in a not so cold night tonight with the cloud cover moving over. Today's weather map, here's this frontal boundary, the Arctic frontal boundary extending along the coast of Alaska, basically from south of the Alaska Peninsula, along the North Gulf Coast down through southeast Alaska. Saw areas of snow throughout southeast Alaska, rain in the extreme southern portion of the Panhandle down that Dixon Entrance area. Snow was occurring in the southern portion of Prince William Sound, even up into the Valdez area, though nothing significant. Snow, as I said earlier, down towards Kodiak Island. And you can see this pretty tight gradient right along the Gulf coastal areas and across the mountains, blowing snow in the northern Panhandle. In fact, the highway there going up into Canada out of the Haines-Skagway area was closed because of poor visibilities and snow and blowing snow there during the day today. Again, clear cold conditions across much of the western mainland, right on up into the interior. High pressure up along that Arctic coast. Again, even though there's high pressure up there, there was some cloud cover along the Arctic coastal areas. Down to the Alaska Peninsula, we did see some snow showers occurring there, even over towards the eastern Aleutian Islands, with some isolated to scattered snow showers out across the Aleutian Islands themselves. Now by tonight, we're still going to see overrunning type of a pattern over the Arctic front in southeast Alaska. The southern Panhandle, a mixture of rain and snow. basically the remainder of the Panhandle right on up into the northern Panhandle. Expect periods of snow and continued blowing snow conditions up through that Chilkoot White Path area. Snow continuing along the North Gulf Coast and the Yakutat area, and there is a snow advisory out through tomorrow morning. Snow into the Prince William Sound area, down towards Kodiak Island. And Kodiak Island, the windy conditions are going to result in reduced visibilities and blowing snow there. Same thing across the Alaska Peninsula. Expect snow showers, numerous snow showers, with windy conditions and blowing snow conditions reducing visibility. Pribilof Islands also looking at the same scenario with snow showers and blowing snow and the windy conditions there. Basically, same conditions are expected across the Aleutian Islands, as we're anticipating scattered snow showers, and when there is some snow showers occurring, expect reduced visibilities and blowing snow. Also up into the Bering Strait region and the Yukon Delta, expect some scattered blowing snow conditions to occur there. Even though it's clear and cold, the windy conditions going to get some resuspended snow that could reduce visibilities. Along the Arctic coast, there's some high pressure up there, but we still expect there to be cloud cover basically from just west of Barrow east to the border. Taking a look at the forecast now for Monday. Things down in southeast Alaska, settling down, generally cloudy conditions there. We'll see some snow in the North Gulf Coast region that'll be tapering off. A mixture of rain and snow down towards Kodiak Island with snow showers as you move on over towards the Alaska Peninsula, and with the wind expected there, reduced visibilities and blowing snow. Snow showers across the Pribilof Islands and the eastern Aleutian Islands, resulting in reduced visibility at time because of the wind and resulting blowing snow. Clear cold conditions over the western interior, the western portion of the state, right on up into the interior, the northeast interior. Some cloud cover can be expected over the northwest Arctic coast to the Barrow area and even portions of the eastern Arctic coast and generally speaking, the western half of the Brooks Range. Scattered to isolated snow showers again are going to be occurring throughout the majority of the Bering Sea, and with the windier conditions also expect reduced visibilities and blowing snow with those snow showers. Now by Tuesday, we do have this large area of low pressure that's basically coming into the Gulf of Alaska. We're going to see some general warming along the coastal areas of the state as we see a push of warmer air. Not significant warming, but it's going to be warmer than what we've been looking at. We have a couple of troughs of low pressure coming up through the Gulf of Alaska. Expect some rain late in the day, evening hours to maybe even nighttime hours Tuesday night, likely to develop in southeast Alaska, and then up in the northern Panhandle in the Haines-Skagway area with this moisture coming up, and this would be Tuesday night time frame, possibility of seeing some snow there. Snow along the North Gulf Coast from basically the Copper River Delta over across the southern portions of Prince William Sound is very likely on Tuesday as well. Cloudy conditions spreading on up across the Chugach Mountains to the Alaska Range, on up into the Susitna Valley over western Alaska. Even some warming conditions can be anticipated as we're going to see some warmer air coming up, but not expecting any type of a Chinook pattern where we'll see drastic warming. Clear, cooler conditions will persist over the interior portions of the state, basically north of the Alaska Range, over towards the Seward Peninsula and on up to the Brooks Range. From the Brooks Range north to the Arctic coast, we are anticipating that there'll be pretty persistent cloud cover there. You may even see a snow shower or two up along the eastern Arctic coast near the border. Taking a look down towards the Alaska Peninsula, we can see this moisture coming on up across Kodiak Island where we expect rain mixed with snow in the Shelikof Strait area, and across portions of the Alaska Peninsula, a rain or mixed rain and snow type of a scenario there. Eastern Aleutian Islands, expect mixed rain and snow, and that should kind of turn back to all snow as we move on out into the evening hours Tuesday, and some snow showers can be expected in the Pribilof Islands in this flow pattern. Out across the Aleutian Islands, there's a chance you may see an isolated snow shower or two in that strong northerly flow. Taking a look now at temperatures around the state today. Temperatures in southeast Alaska, low 40s in the southern Panhandle, rapidly cooled into the 20s as you move on up towards the mid to northern Panhandle. Single digits as you go on up into the Chilkoot White Path area. Temperature was in the 20s in the Yakutat area, 20s and 30s as you move over towards the Sound. Teens in the southern Cook Inlet region to right around 10 in Anchorage. Temperatures really didn't warm up much in the Copper River Basin, stayed around 20 below there. Temperatures in the right around 10 below as you cross the Alaska Range, where the windier conditions were, get down in the valleys, it stayed on the cool side around 13 below in Fairbanks. Moving on up towards the Brooks Range and the Arctic coast, you see temperatures in the Brooks Range generally in the minus teens, although the Circle did stay pretty frigid today at about 33 below. Along the Arctic coast itself, temperatures in the minus teens to minus 20s. Going on over towards the Seward Peninsula, the Kotzebue Sound Sign, temperatures right around 10 below, moving up to about 8 above as you move over towards Nome and that Norton Sound area in the single digits above and below zero. Southwestern Alaska, Bristol Bay area temperatures basically single digits above and below zero. Then you see the warming as you move on out across the Alaska Peninsula, though cold by their standards in the low to mid 20s there. Temperatures in the teens in the Pribilof Islands, mid 20s in the eastern Aleutian Islands, and out across the Aleutian Islands, upper 20s towards Atka and Adak, and about 32 out towards Shemya. Taking a look at our lows for tonight, expect temperatures in southeast Alaska to be right around freezing in the southern panhandle, 20s to teens in the central panhandle, single digits as you move on up towards the Haines-Skagway area, and of course up in the pass it'll be below zero temperatures there. Temperatures along the North Gulf Coast, pretty cold conditions for Prince William Sound, right around 10 degrees. Copper River Basin, expect your temperatures to stay right around that 25 to 30 below range. Eastern Interior, Tanana Valley, Upper Yukon Valley, minus 30s, minus 40s, even dropping down to about 51 below up towards Fort Yukon there. Up along the Arctic coast, expect your temperatures to dip down into the minus 30s. Over northwestern Alaska, not quite as cold in the minus 20s to the minus teens. Over towards the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coast, expect your temperatures to be around 10 below. Temperatures aren't going to change much in that Bristol Bay area, single digits above and below zero. Same thing across the Alaska Peninsula, though you may see some locations dropping down into the teens. And then in the Pribilof Islands, expect your temperatures to be in the teens as well, 20s across the Aleutian Islands to low 30s out towards Shemya. For your highs tomorrow, southeast Alaska should see some pretty warm conditions in the southern panhandle and the outer coastal areas, right around 40. Temperatures in the northern panhandle getting up into the 30s. So we are going to start to see that trend, the temperature trend warming up there. Temperatures warming up along the North Gulf Coast into the 20s to low 30s. Even in the Copper River Basin, getting up to around 9 below there. The Cook Inlet region and the Susitna Valley, teens to upper 20s, mid 30s across Kodiak Island. Temperatures over the Bristol Bay area, expect your temperatures to be in the teens there. Into the interior regions of the state, still expecting sub-zero readings, although a bit warmer than what we saw today. Temperatures up into the Brooks Range, into the minus teens, although up into the Circle area, we're not expecting much warming at all. Still staying pretty frigid, around 42 below there. Minus teens, minus 20s along the Arctic coast. Western Alaska, generally single digits above and below zero is what you should anticipate. Teens in the Bristol Bay, 30s across the Alaska Peninsula, low 20s in the Pribilof Islands, and 30s along the Aleutian Islands. Taking a look now at our flying weather, marginal to IFR conditions from the northern panhandle across the North Gulf Coast to Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, with marginal conditions all along the Aleutian Islands. Even though we have that high pressure pushing down, it's pushing those clouds across the Aleutian Islands. That'll keep the conditions in the marginal category. For our passes tomorrow, Anaktuvik as well as Adigan Pass are expected to be VFR. VFR conditions for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, as well as Rainy Pass. VFR conditions for Windy Pass, as well as Isabel and Mentasta Pass. Moving on down to the Chugach Mountains, Tonita Pass, expect VFR conditions. Marginal conditions, possibly even IFR and Portage Pass. Down towards southeast Alaska, expect your conditions to be marginal, possibly via IFR at times. Taking a look now at our freezing levels, pretty much at the surface throughout the majority of the state, sloping to about 2,000 feet down towards Dixon Entrance and about 1,000 feet just south of the Alaska Peninsula. For our icing for tomorrow, expect isolated to widespread moderate rime icing over the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutian Islands, with light isolated rime icing over the Kodiak Island area from your freezing level to 13,000 feet. For our jet stream, 150 knot jet coming off south of the Kamchatka Peninsula, 160 knots well south of the Aleutian Islands, 110 knot jet coming up into the Kodiak Island area, dropping off to 60 knots across the southern mainland to 90 knots as we move on over towards the British Columbia area. Down to that 9,000 foot level, expect light winds in general over southeast Alaska up to about 30 knots over that North Gulf Coast region, 25 to 30 knot winds across across the Kodiak Island area, 40 knots across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Bering Sea. Light and variable winds over much of the mainland, about 25 knot winds right along the Arctic coast, but much stronger winds as you move north of the coast. 15 knot winds over northwest Arctic coast, and then you see your winds increasing to about 35 knots coming down through that St. Lawrence Island area. And you can see the flow coming over the top of the low pressure system, about 40 to 55 knot winds across the central to western Bering Sea, and about 35 knot to 45 knot winds over the western Aleutian Islands to the central Aleutian Islands. Taking a look down to that 3,000 foot level, expect light and variable winds over southeast Alaska, 25 to 35 knot winds over the North Gulf Coast and down to Kodiak Island. Light and variable winds over the majority of the mainland of the state. Southwestern Alaska, expect your winds about 25 knots coming out over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. 50 knot winds out of Bristol Bay and the eastern Alaska Peninsula to 45 knot winds coming over the eastern Aleutian Islands. 30 knot winds coming down through the Bering Strait across the north central portion of the Bering Sea, and expect your winds to be about 35 to 40 knots across the Aleutian Islands themselves. For our turbulence tomorrow, the main area of turbulence will be over the the mountains in the Bristol Bay area, as well as the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutian Islands. Widespread moderate below 3,000 feet there, and then some isolated moderate turbulence up over the northwest portion of the state. That wraps up this portion of the show. Enjoy the segment and come back for the marine forecast.
There are some important things we can all do to avoid runway incursions. Things we probably all know, or have known but forgotten, or that we sometimes overlook because of distractions. Some of these things are simply plain old common sense. Always look, listen, and expect the unexpected. Minimize distractions by keeping a sterile cockpit while taxiing. Know where you are and where you're going. Never guess. Always know. And if you don't know or are uncertain, always ask. And that brings me to a word or two about the best ally we pilots have at Howard Airport, the air traffic controller.
Runway 25 left at Delta position and hold traffic on the downwind.
These are the professionals dedicated to leading us safely through the often complex and confusing runways and taxiways and traffic of a Howard Airport.
This is a 6-year Papa turning base at the 605 freeway, report turning final.
The pace of air traffic communications can be confusing, even overwhelming. We should not feel hesitant to ask controllers to repeat an instruction, to ask for progressive taxi instructions if we need them.
Narrow ground, Cherokee 32123, request progressive taxi instructions, please. November, Charlie, Bravo.
If you don't know, ask. If you aren't sure, verify.
When communicating with air traffic control, always listen before you transmit.
Cessna 3284 Delta, holding position, runway 19 right.
Also, listen to what the controller is saying to other aircraft. It can have a critical bearing on your safety. Again, maintaining situational awareness at all times is key. Be sure you understand all air traffic control instructions. If you receive a clearance you don't understand or is contrary to your position on the airport, you should verify the clearance.
Cessna 453 Sierra Papa. Runway 19 full length, clear for takeoff.
Air Tower, Cessna 453 Sierra Papa is at Bravo 3. Verify we're still cleared for takeoff.
Cessna 3 Sierra Papa. Negative, hold your position.
453 Sierra Papa. Holding short, runway 19 at Bravo 3.
Runway incursions occur most frequently when pilots enter or cross a runway without authorization. Typically, communication between the pilot and air traffic control is good. Pilots hear and read back hold short instructions and know what they're supposed to do.
Cessna 93018, hold short, runway 26 right.
But they cross hold short lines or taxi on the runway without authorization anyway. Always read back all hold short instructions.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
Arrow 1504, hold short, runway 6 left.
A simple Roger won't do. This applies to position and hold and clearances to enter a runway as well.
Cessna 80138, position and hold, runway 25 left.
Cessna 80138, position and hold runway 25 left.
We can avoid most runway incursions by reducing distraction in the cockpit while taxiing, familiarizing ourselves with our departure and our destination airports, and staying alert at all times.
Be sure to write down taxi instructions, but never do it on the move. It can be a distraction. The same is true with checklists. Conduct them while stopped, never on the move. Pilots, controllers, and drivers all rely on their eyes as their primary sensors. And the simple fact is, our eyes don't work as well at night as they do during the day. The visual acuity we lose at night, combined with inconsistent cockpit lighting, canopy reflections, and possible rain, snow, or fog, make taxi, takeoff, and landing operations that seem easy during the day a real challenge at night. Pilots should observe a few simple lighting standards that will help those around them maintain their situational awareness. When taxiing into position and hold, turn on all exterior lights except landing lights. This will make your aircraft more conspicuous to other aircraft on final. Don't turn on your landing lights until you have been given clearance to take off. If you see an aircraft with its landing lights turned on, it's a clear signal that that aircraft is moving or is about to move down the runway for takeoff. When instructed to cross a runway, turn on all lights, including landing lights. The exception would be if your lights would interfere with someone holding or approaching from the other side of the runway. Also, when you line up for departure at night, consider lining up about 3 feet to the left or right of center line, so another pilot on final can more easily distinguish your aircraft from the runway lights.
Welcome back, and let's take a look at the ice edge before we get into our marine forecast. The ice edge is basically about 65 miles north of the Pribilof Islands. At least it was this morning. It's going to continue to expand down to the south and west in this cold northerly flow pattern that we're experiencing now. Taking a look at southeast Alaska's forecast for Monday. Southern inside waters, nothing too strong there. Southeast winds about 15 knots. Winds increasing to north 30 knots up through that Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area. Southern outside waters, east winds about 15 to 20 knots. And as we move on up to the north to the east Gulf Coast, southeast winds 20 knots. Taking a look at the area for Tuesday, expect your winds to increase a bit down in the southern inside waters, about 30 to 40 knot winds out of the southeast. Gale force winds developing up in that Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay area, north winds about 35 knots. Southern outside waters, east winds 40 knots, southeast winds 40 knots as you move on further north to off the Gustavus area, with southeast winds 35 knots along that east Gulf Coast. For the south central waters on Monday, expect your winds to be out of the east and northeast pretty much throughout the entire area. 20 knots from Prince William Sound to 25 knots along the north Gulf Coast. Northeast winds 30 knots in the Barren Island waters. Northeast to east winds about 30 to 35 knots across Kodiak Island to Chillicothe Strait. And northeast winds 20 to 30 knots coming down Cook Inlet. On Tuesday, we expect the winds to basically stay northeast 20 knots in the Sound. East to southeast winds 35 knots along the north Gulf Coast. East winds 35 to 40 knots from east of the Barren Islands down to south of Kodiak Island. Northeast winds 40 knots from the southern Cook Inlet, south of the Calgon Island area, right on down through the Augustine waters and Chillicothe Strait, with the winds out of the north at 25 knots in that northern Cook Inlet region. Taking a look at the Alaska Peninsula on Monday, expect your winds to be out of the east to northeast about 35 to 45 knots throughout the entire area. On Tuesday, we expect the winds to basically remain out of the east and northeast, 30 to 35 knots. The lightest winds will be south of the western Alaska Peninsula, but pretty much gale force winds everywhere else. For your Aleutian Islands on Monday, expect your winds to be out of the northeast about 40 to 45 knots over the eastern to central Aleutian Islands. North winds 40 knots as we move on out towards the western Aleutian Islands, and north winds 30 knots in the extreme western Aleutian Islands out in the Shemya area. Taking a look at the area for Tuesday, expect your winds to be out of the northeast about 35 to 40 knots over the eastern Aleutian Islands. North winds 40 knots as we move on out across the central to western Aleutian Islands, and dropping off to about 30 knots as we move on out towards the extreme western Aleutian Islands. Taking a look now for your Bering Sea coastal waters, expect northeast winds across the entire region, 30 knots from St. Lawrence Island down to the Nunivak Island region, 35 to 40 knots from St. Matthew Island down to the Pribilof Islands. Taking a look at the area on Tuesday, winds remaining northeast across the area, 30 knots from St. Lawrence Island down to St. Matthew Island, 35 knots in the Nunivak Island region with 40-knot winds out of the northeast in the Pribilof Islands. For our Arctic coastal waters, on Monday, expect your winds to be out of the north 20 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound to off Cape Lisburne. North winds 10 knots off Point Lay. Winds lighter throughout much of the day off of Barrow, increasing to west 20 knots late in the day. Southwest winds 20 knots off Prudhoe Bay and over towards Kaktovik. Taking a look at the forecast now for Tuesday, winds remaining north outside of the Kotzebue Sound area at about 15 knots. Northeast winds 15 knots from Point Lay down to Point Hope. Northwest winds 10 knots in the Barrow area with northwest to west winds 15 to 20 knots over the eastern Arctic coastal waters. Taking a look now at the forecast again for tonight, the big concern is the low wind chills on the north side of the Alaska Range in that Tanana Valley area through the mountain ridgetop areas, as well as into the middle Yukon River Valley in the Koyukuk region. Very dangerously low wind chills there around 45 below. Expect snow to continue along the east Gulf Coast by Yakutat. Several more inches can be anticipated. Snow with some blowing snow up through that Chilkoot White Pass area. Rain becoming mixed with snow in the southern Panhandle. Some snow showers and blowing snow across the Kodiak Island area as well as the Alaska Peninsula. Also expect some snow showers with blowing snow from the Pribilof Islands down to the eastern Aleutian Islands as well as the western Aleutian Islands. But we're out of time for the show this evening. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.